Welcome to the Modern Medicine Movement Podcast with Dr. Thomas Hemingway. Have you ever looked in the mirror and said to yourself, I thought I'd be healthier, in better shape, feel better both physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and be further along in my life? If so, come on this journey with my dad as he explores all things health and wellness from a holistic medical perspective, even as a classically trained physician. He'll share integrative strategies to optimize health and inspire you to join the modern medicine movement.
Welcome to the Modern Medicine Movement Podcast. Dr. Thomas Hemingway here. Super pumped, super grateful, super excited to be with you another week. Thank you for taking time out of your day to tune in and to share and to listen. And I so appreciate you guys. Oh my gosh, what a beautiful day it is. It's springtime. The sun is out. The weather is schizophrenic, really. We have literally 40 to 50 degree weather. The next day it's in the single digits. So it's been trippy. We've had sunshine, then we've had snow, and it's been all over the map. But hey, keeps us on our toes. I sort of love that about life. It keeps us thinking, keeps us guessing, keeps us ready, you know. I guess maybe that's my background as an ER doctor. I've been 20 plus years in the ER, and you never know what you're going to get. You know, every day is different. There's no quote unquote normal day. So this funky springtime weather is right up my alley, and I love it. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate you guys. Appreciate the feedback. Oh my gosh, can't wait to share with you a recent review. I just love hearing from you guys. So if you haven't subscribed, if you haven't written a review, especially on Apple Podcasts, this is what gets the word out. This is how we get this important information to more people. Super easy to do. Just if you do Apple Podcasts, just scroll down to where you see the 5 stars. Click on the one farthest to the right. Click on that. And then the little link right below to the left, the little box with the pencil coming out the top. Click on that, write a review. And just let me know what you're liking. Let me know what you've enjoyed. You know, really appreciate you guys. Just a quick shout out to Edgeber. I don't know how that's pronounced, but 5 stars, and it says, great show, ! This doctor is amazing, shares important topics in a simple and easy to understand format, very down to earth, and you can feel that he truly cares about the listener. Oh my gosh, thank you so much for that. I so appreciate that, and I'm here for you guys. So just shout me out on Instagram at Aloha Surf Doc or at Modern Medicine Movement, or look me up on Facebook, Thomas Hemingway on Facebook, or Modern Medicine Movement Podcast. I also have an email. You can reach out to me, Modern Medicine Movement Podcast at gmail.com. I listen to your feedback. I podcast on questions you guys have. And this is one that came up recently. In fact, last week's show was all about the deficiency in the enzyme MTHFR. No, not a swear word. Methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase enzyme, which is so important in our folate pathway so that we can have the active folate to be able to be used for all kinds of awesome reasons in our body, for methylation, for DNA and RNA synthesis, turning on and off genes, so many important things. If you want to know what the MTHFR is all about, check out last week's show. Super good information on that. And this week is sort of a follow-up question to some of the feedback that I got from you guys on just supplements in general. Like, what the heck are we doing spending money on supplements? Well, first of all, it's not just you. It's more than half of the developed world buys supplements every year. And this is a probably $40 to $50 billion industry. And there are some reasons to do it. You know, I'm not going to promote any particular supplement on this show, but I'm going to give you some information in general on supplements. If you want to reach out to me and find out what I take, I do take some supplements despite having a super clean diet, trying to get everything I can out of those good, solid, whole, real, natural foods. You know, I eat the whole rainbow, both fruits, vegetables, meats of every kind, fish and steak, grass-fed, grass-finished. everything you can imagine, as long as it's well and properly raised and cared for and fed the good stuff, because you eat what they eat, what their parents have eaten, so to speak. It all comes down the line. You got to pay attention to the sourcing of your food, not only the meat that you may get or fish, it's important, but also in the produce. Hopefully you're buying organic, non-GMO, hopefully local, so you know what the fields are like. Hopefully it's a regenerative agriculture. It matters so much because, that old adage my grandmother used to tell you, garbage in, garbage out. It's really, really true. And we are what we eat. Like, no joke. If you eat, bacon that was fed canola oil, like, you're getting that canola oil in yourself. So hopefully you can figure out where to get well-sourced meats. Super important. Oh my gosh, I wish I could raise my own. I don't have a big enough property to do that, but I'm looking forward to some locally sourced meat. We do have that grass-fed and finished in Kawaii. We do have it some other places. I got friends that raise cattle, so I'm hoping to reach out to them so that I know exactly where all my meat's coming from. And until that point, I'm just looking for the grass-fed and finished in the grocery stores and so on. And at the end of the day, I do my best. I do my best to eat clean, to eat natural, but unfortunately, there are still going to be some deficiencies. Both micronutrient deficiencies, vitamin and mineral. We'll talk about the most common ones. We'll talk about how we can access good, high-quality supplements, what you can look for. And I just wanted to start it off with a quote by a very smart physician, a medical doctor who's been doing this natural, holistic, regenerative, and functional medicine for over 25 years. It's a good dude by the name of Mark Hyman. Hopefully you guys have heard of him. He's in the likes of Joseph Mercola, just one of these well-established long-term health docs that's into the holistic approach, which I also value, share, and emulate. And Dr. Mark Hyman actually just wrote a book, and I'm not getting any props for sharing it, but I think it was a solid book. It's called The Pegan Diet. He's also written other books on regenerative agriculture, which actually, with respect to this topic today, are pretty important because it does matter what we eat. It literally matters. There's a cool one that he wrote called The Food Fix. If you guys aren't familiar with it, it says how to save our health, our economy, our communities, and our planet one bite at a time. And he talks all about sort of how food, is grown, both plant and animal. Talks about how it should be grown, the regenerative agriculture techniques, and unfortunately how most of it is grown, which is not in the best technique. And he speaks to all the details about that. Super brilliant dude, Mark Hyman, MD. Anyway, a quote from him, he says, direct quote, "Even with a perfect diet." The perfect diet, guys. And who out there has a perfect diet? I certainly don't have a perfect diet, right? I always tell you guys about the 80-20 rule that I follow, which is that 80% of the time I try to make really good health, and dietary choices. And, 20% of the time, if it's a kid's birthday party or something like that, well, I'm going to have a piece of cake. Hopefully it's been baked with good ingredients, and I, may not have a big piece of cake, but I want to celebrate, the different events of life. Life is meant to be enjoyed. And so I'm not opposed to eating some things that are not, super perfectly healthy some of the time. But as long as 80% of the time we're doing a great job, we're going to do just fine. Life is to be lived and enjoyed and appreciated. And so do the best you can. Don't stress out if occasionally you're at a birthday party and you might just happen to have a piece of cake or something. It's all good. But this quote from Dr. Mark Hyman says, even with a perfect diet, which most of us don't have, including me, the combination of many things, including our depleted soils, we're going to talk all about this in this podcast, our depleted soils, the storage and the transportation of our food. Many of us know that our food is often picked well before it's ripened, all this kind of stuff. Genetic alterations of traditional heirloom species, that's the GMO stuff that we know about, and the increased stress and nutritional demands resulting from a toxic environment make it impossible for us to get the vitamins and minerals we need solely from the foods we eat. Dr. Mark Hyman. I'm going to say that one more time. Even with a perfect diet, the combination of many things, including our depleted soils, the storage and transportation of our food, the genetic alterations of traditional heirloom species, and the increased stress and nutritional demands resulting from a toxic environment make it impossible for us to get the vitamins and minerals we need solely from the foods we eat. Impossible. And he then later quotes a Journal of the American Medical Association, or the JAMA, article, which is by Fairfield and Fletcher. I'll put it in the show notes. It says, Vitamins for Chronic Disease Prevention in Adults, a Scientific Review. I'll put that in the show notes. And basically in that, it says that there are many vitamins and minerals that can pose a problem for many of us, especially as we get older. There's also certain groups, those that are vegetarian or vegan, those that tend to drink a little bit more than average, or folks that have problems absorbing their nutrients, like all those folks who may have GI illnesses that make absorption difficult, be it an inflammatory bowel condition like Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, IBD, or if they've had any kind of bowel surgery like a gastric bypass, a Roux-en-Y, all these kinds of, stomach and bowel surgeries, which may change the size of their stomach or the transport of the nutrients, if they have part of their bowel removed or bypassed, it's going to make absorption a fair amount more difficult. So they're going to be more prone to different vitamin, mineral, and other micronutrient deficiencies. And there's many, many common ones out there. It talks about folate in this article. We know all about folate from our last podcast and how originally it was described, 30 or 40 years ago as causing neural tube defects because folks who were planning to get pregnant or who were pregnant were not getting enough folate in their diet, and they were having babies with neural tube defects, so they recommended the folate. And unfortunately, most of it was recommended as folic acid, which is not very bioavailable, as we learned in last week's show. So check that out if you missed that one. It also talks about vitamin E and a lot of the fat-soluble vitamins, which are important, especially those that can help prevent some eye conditions like macular degeneration. We've talked about those before, the lutein and zeaxanthin. Talks about vitamin D in that JAMA article because many of us, I think it's about 80% of the developed world, doesn't get enough vitamin D from our friend, the sun. I mean, even me, even though I live in Hawaii, there are a couple months a year that I may not be there, and I may be in the mountains, in the snow, and I'm not getting hardly any vitamin D. And if I am, it might just be on my nose, Usually my mouth and eyes are covered with, helmet goggles and, that sort of thing. And so I might just be exposed in a tiny amount on my face, which is not going to be enough to get me that awesome nutrient vitamin D, which is so important for our health, our immune system, so many things, our brain health. I talked all about that in an entire podcast, and this is a common deficiency. There's also a quote, at the outset I wanted to share with you from the BMJ, which is a highly respected medical journal, the British Medical Journal. This was in 2020, so just a year ago. I'll put it in the show notes. From this article about supplements, it says, quote, despite the high use of supplements, remember I said in developed countries over 50% use some kind of supplements, it states inadequate intakes of the micronutrients are still common in high-income countries where dietary patterns are typically energy-rich but nutrient poor. I'm going to repeat that. Despite the high use of supplements, inadequate intakes of micronutrients are still common in high-income countries where dietary patterns are typically energy-rich but nutrient poor. This is from the British Medical Journal 2020. I could not agree more. In fact, in my recent energy podcast, where I talk about the 3 simple yet so important things that we can do to up the ante to get us our youthful vigor and vitality back, I mentioned this, how we have plenty of calories typically in the Western world and developed countries. We're eating plenty of calories. We're overfed, but we are in general undernourished. And that is primarily because we're not getting the nutrients that we need from our foods. And this is a twofold problem. It's either because we're eating too many of the highly processed foods that don't have many, nutrients in them, or that we're missing out on a lot of the micronutrients because of our poor dietary choices, or even if we're doing great dietary choices, like our good friend Dr. Mark Hyman mentioned, it's going to be impossible for us to get all of the vitamins and minerals that we need just from our diet because our soils are depleted. They are certainly depleted. And what's interesting about this whole soil phenomenon is that, unfortunately, we have known about it here in the US of A for over 80 years. There was a really important report from the 1936 Senate committee, which was done in Washington, D.C. back in June of 1936. I'm going to put a link to this in the show notes. It's just a fascinating paper. And if you guys are nerdy or if you're just, history buffs, I think you'll find this super interesting. It's the United States Senate document number 264 from June of 1936. And it was presented by Rex Beach. And he shares the research of Dr. Charles Northern. And when he talks about Dr. Northern, who did a lot of this pioneering work in the nutritional deficiencies, he says, this quiet pioneer and genius in the field of nutrition demonstrates that countless human ills stem from the fact that impoverished soil of America no longer provides plant foods with the mineral elements essential to human nourishment and health. To overcome this alarming condition, he doctors sick soils and by seeming miracles raises truly healthy and health-giving fruits and vegetables. And this was done in a regenerative approach, but unfortunately this has not been well adopted. And unfortunately, especially in the developed world where we are doing monocropping, especially when we use the same soils over and over for the same products like corn and soy and wheat, and we're using GMO seeds and lots of pesticides, we are not taking good care of our soils. We are not. I just want to read a little bit of this report. It's so fascinating. It says, and I quote, remember that this is from 1936. It was called the, quote, anemic earth, unquote, the anemic earth. And that's because of the depletion of the minerals in our soils. And it says, do you know that most of us today are suffering from certain dangerous diet deficiencies which cannot be remedied until the depleted soils from which our foods come are brought into proper mineral balance? The alarming fact is that foods, fruits, and vegetables and grains now being raised on millions of acres of land that no longer contain enough of certain needed minerals are starving us, no matter how much of them we eat. This talk about minerals is novel and quite startling. In fact, a realization of the importance of minerals in food is so new that textbooks on nutritional dietetics contain very little about it. Nevertheless, it is something that concerns all of us. And the further we delve into it, the more startling it becomes. You would think, wouldn't you, a carrot is a carrot. That one is about as good as the other as far as nourishment is concerned. But it isn't. One carrot may look and taste like another and yet be lacking in the particular mineral element which our system requires and which carrots are supposed to contain. Laboratory tests prove that fruits, the vegetables, the grains, the eggs, and even the milk and meats of today are not what they were a few generations ago. No man of today can eat enough fruits and vegetables to supply his system with the minerals he requires for perfect health, because his stomach isn't big enough to hold them, and we are running too big stomachs. No longer does a balanced and fully nourishing diet consist of merely so many calories or certain vitamins or a fixed proportion of starches, proteins, carbohydrates. We now know it must contain, in addition, something like a score of mineral salts. It is bad news to learn from our leading authorities that 99% of the American people are deficient in these minerals, and that a marked deficiency in any one or more of the important minerals actually results in disease. Any upset of the balance, any considerable lack of one or another element, however microscopic the body requirement may be, and we sicken, suffer, and shorten our lives. Guys, this is crazy. This is 1936. I could go on and on. It's so fascinating. It's, oh my gosh, so humbling and interesting to read this. And it's so sad at the same time because in 80 years, we have not done much at all. I mean, literally, this report is over 80 years old, and yet we haven't done much to replenish our soils. And so if you want to know how to do that, check out that book I mentioned by Dr. Mark Hyman called The Food Fix. There's also a lot of great information on regenerative agriculture out there, and that's basically getting our soils back to how they once were, several generations ago, when we had both plants and animals on the same soil. They were grazing. The animals were pooping to fertilize the soil. We weren't adding a bunch of artificial synthetic nitrates. We weren't monocropping. We were rotating our crops. We were using, free-range chickens to poop in the fields and have manure, and, the livestock as well got to roam free and poop in the land, and all that cycles. And we got the nutrients back into the soil, and our soils were so much healthier several generations ago. And unfortunately, that's just not the way it is in most places anymore. It's just not the way it is. So let me touch on, now that we've kind of set the pace a little bit, that it's basically impossible for us to get all the nutrients we need to live a healthful and hopefully a long life just from our foods. We're going to talk about which are the most common, vitamin and mineral deficiencies, which ones have been proven in the literature to be helpful if we supplement, and then if we choose to supplement, how do we pick a supplement? Because as we all know, the FDA doesn't have the same kind of governance on individual supplement companies, and we can't always be certain that we're getting what the label says unless they're using some independent, verification techniques and things like that. So it's a whole Pandora's box out there to talk about. And I want to just talk about a few of the proven benefits out there, because there's a lot of mixed data out there. And somebody might tell you, hey, the data shows that vitamins don't work anyway. And, depending on what data you're looking at and what they studied in particular, and what, if you just look up multivitamin, for example, there's at least as much negative studies as there are positive studies in the quote unquote multivitamin or MVI literature. But most of the multivitamins they studied were kind of crappy, to be honest. Most of them weren't well methylated. They weren't the best vitamins out there, and they were looking for lots of different things at once. And when you study something, you really need to have a very honed in trial that's looking at one thing at a time. Hopefully it's done with what's called an RCT, which is a randomized controlled trial, where they take two groups of people that are blinded, both of them. So it's called a double blinded. One group gets the actual vitamin or supplement that they're studying. The other group gets a placebo. So they both get something, and neither one knows which they're getting. So that's a double blind, randomized controlled and prospective trial, which means that you do it, in sort of a future path. You don't just do a survey and say, what did you eat versus what did this other group eat, and then try to compare it and make sense of that, because those can only show what's called an association. And that's the problem with most of the studies out there that look at things like diet or that look at things like supplements, because they just ask people in a survey, hey, do you take supplements? Do you not take supplements? Which one do you take? Or what kind of foods do you eat? Or how do you even remember what you ate a year ago? This kind of thing. And they just take a survey and then they try to make some sense of it. And at the end of the day, they try to say X causes Y or Z. And that's a blatant misuse of science, because anytime you do that, you do what's called an epidemiological study. You cannot state causation, that one thing leads to another. That is not the type of study that's designed to do that. It can only say what's called a correlation. In other words, it may be related, but we cannot say causation. And that's how we got into all this deep doo-doo, right? In the 60s, 70s, 80s, when all this research came out about, oh my gosh, saturated fat and meats and butter and lard and all the natural fats and milk and all these things that are protein or animal based, they're so bad for you, they're going to cause you to have a heart attack and this, that, and the other. And it was completely bad data. And it was all observational and epidemiological. It was never designed to predict the future and state any kind of causation. It was only a weak association at best. So it was really crappy data. People took it as gospel. And now, as we know, as we've done more research and had lots more data to look at, that we were led astray for many, many years about sort of the natural fats and natural cholesterol and how we used to think it was bad for us, and now we know that it's not. It's actually healthy to eat good fats, natural fats, healthy cholesterols, because we need it. Our brain needs it. Our body needs it. Anyway, I digress. So supplements, as we know, can come in so many forms, right? We can have a capsule, we can have a powder, we can have a liquid, all different forms, and they are listed as supplements, right? Because nothing can replace a good, solid, natural, whole foods diet. I repeat, nothing can replace that. You can't just say, I'm going to buy the perfect supplement and then I'm going to eat garbage all day long. Like that just doesn't work, number one. Plus, your body literally will take that garbage in and that becomes you. Even if you take the best supplement out there, it's not going to work out well if you don't feed your body with the best possible food. So it does not replace a good, healthy diet. Let me just start with that. And as I mentioned, there's been a lot of studies out there looking at supplements. Some have shown to be effective, some not so much. And so let me just quote something from the Penn State Medicine website. It says, in addition to a healthy diet, so it always starts with a healthy diet, there is evidence that some supplements can benefit your overall well-being with little or no risks. And that's the good thing. Like supplements, for the most part, are not risky, unless you're overdosing purposefully or even unknowingly. Most supplements are not going to cause any significant negative side effects, which is important. So the ones that have shown benefit by the research, by the data, I'm just going to go one by one, talk a little bit about that. Most of you have heard of the B vitamins. We talked all about one of them last week, folate, so I'm not going to perseverate on that. We know that folate is good for you, and if you have MTHFR, you're probably going to really have to pay close attention to your source of folate because your body has difficulty processing it into the active form. So why not get a methylated vitamin? Why not get the methylfolate, right? Why would you want to get folic acid that's not methylated, that's not bioavailable? Why not get the methylated folate? And there's not that many vitamins out there that have that. So I would humbly submit that a methylated folate is much, much better. Anyway, its sort of cousin, another B vitamin, B12, is super important. And it's actually, it has some correlation with folate because they're in the same B vitamin family. There's some of the enzymes that are used together as cofactors. The methylation comes into play here as well because methylcobalamin, which is vitamin B12, is much more bioavailable, absorbable, and usable by your body than the non-methylated form. So once again, another vitamin that's important to look for on your label would be methylcobalamin, not just cobalamin by itself, or there's all other types of cobalamin, but the methylated form is the best. And the studies do show that B12 is helpful to keep your nerves healthy, your blood cells healthy. Also, it helps make the DNA. It helps to prevent certain types of anemia. B12 is something that so many people are deficient in. I have an uncle who suffered from this, and he ended up having to get B12 shots, and he basically had a real heavily plant-based diet, didn't eat much, if any, animal-based foods, and he had no idea that he was missing out on this important vitamin. And I'm all about plant-based, but I would just say if you are strictly plant-based and you don't eat any animal products, 100%, you will need vitamin B12. And so why not get a methylated B12 or methylcobalamin, because that one is going to be bioavailable. You're going to use it, and it's not just going to be, at the end of the day, expensive urine. So vitamin B12 in the research has been shown to be helpful to take as a supplement. Once again, I would submit that the methylated vitamin B12 or methylcobalamin is much more helpful. We've talked about folic acid or folate, which is, the more bioavailable. The methylfolate form is important in reducing neural tube defects, birth defects, helps with DNA, RNA synthesis, turning on and off genes, methylation, all of that. Vitamin D has been another vitamin that's been shown in many different areas, scientifically proven to be helpful, not only for the strong bones that you hear about, right, as a kid. I got to drink milk for strong bones and take calcium and so on. That's the tip of the iceberg. Vitamin D is so important that I did an entire podcast dedicated to it because, 70% of the world is vitamin D deficient, probably 90% in the Northern Hemisphere during winter. And so it's so common and yet so vitally important. There's tons of research out there with respect to vitamin D and the, different illnesses, even COVID, lots of data with vitamin D showing you'll have a less severe COVID illness if your vitamin D levels are normal or above normal, as opposed to the low levels, which most of us have, unfortunately. So if you don't know your level, get it checked. And if it's low, I would humbly submit, get a D3, which is the active form, get a D3 vitamin D supplement. Super important. And try to get out in the sun. Sun is amazing. Not only for the vitamin D, but just for your mind, your body, to be out in nature. Oh my gosh. Vitamin M, vitamin N, and vitamin D are my three favorite vitamins. You guys know what those are. Vitamin D, vitamin M for movement, and vitamin N for nature. So calcium, I couldn't talk about vitamin D without talking about calcium. It also has been shown to help promote bone health, decrease osteoporosis. You got to be careful with your calcium because you really don't want to overdose on it because you can take too much. You can certainly overdose. So be careful. Make sure you're taking basically recommended amount. You can look at the label and see what the RDA is and so on and so forth. You don't want to overdo it because you can get things like kidney stones and bone pain and constipation and all dehydration, all kinds of issues if you way overdo it with the calcium part. But calcium is important, especially with vitamin D. Those go together. If you don't have vitamin D at an appropriate level, you can't absorb the calcium anyway. So important to get both of those up to speed. We know that both vitamin C and E are some of these sort of antioxidant types of vitamins that are super helpful for immune function. Lots of data that shows that. Also, you don't want to overdose on vitamin E, for example. Vitamin C, it's pretty hard to overdose on. I mean, people are literally getting nowadays, all these biohackers out there are getting things like vitamin C infusions. There's a doc I've mentioned in my previous podcasts and when I spoke of vitamin C that literally has been using it IV for many, many years in high doses, never had any issues with overdose, and it's been able to really help support immune function. Fish oil, like the omega-3 fatty acids, I've talked about those. DHA, for example, which supports both healthy brain function and also it helps with your heart health, right? I talked about that in a previous podcast as well. You can get that from, eating fish, like especially the fatty fish, like tuna, mackerel, salmon. I love tuna or the ahi of Hawaii, the fresh ahi fish. I mean, whenever you buy fish, please try to do your best to get a wild-caught fish because it's going to have less mercury, less toxins than a farm-raised fish, right? And the wild is how we were meant to get stuff, right? That's ancestrally how we always got stuff. We hunted, we gathered, all from the wild. So that's fish oil, or the omega-3s are super helpful, both for brain health as well as cardiovascular health. I've spoken all about that on a previous podcast on healthy fats. Zinc is another one that's got a lot of data behind it. We know that it's important for not only our skin health, but also it helps with being able to pump up our immune function. I take zinc every day. I take zinc. selenium, vitamin C. I also take, with zinc, I take the lutein and zeaxanthine, which are helpful and have been shown in many studies to promote eye health and reduce the risk of macular degeneration, right? And so those are some of the common ones. There's others like melatonin. I talked all about that on a previous podcast. It's been shown to help, counter the jet lag that we often get. It's natural. Our body makes it. You just don't want to overdo it. I wouldn't recommend taking it every single day, but it can be helpful, especially with jet lag. And so those are sort of tip of the iceberg kind of stuff. There's also been some research on chromium and blood sugar management in a double-blind controlled trial to be helpful for decreasing insulin resistance and improving insulin sensitivity and improving blood sugar balance. And so that's a micronutrient that I personally take as well. That's chromium. And let me just say that always consult, with your healthcare provider if you're going to start a real rigorous vitamin or supplement program, and make sure that you're on the same page. Unfortunately, a lot of the Western trained physicians out there don't have a lot of knowledge in vitamins, minerals, supplements, and nutrition, because I know, I've been there. I went through it. I went to medical school, for crying out loud, and I think I had a couple hours in the entire 4-year curriculum of medical school. And then when I did my 4 years of specialty training, I don't think I had any nutrition, supplement or dietary, lectures, studies, or material. And so most of the doctors out there that are Western trained don't have a good handle on this. So you got to consider your source. I would recommend, if you're having difficulties in any of these areas, considering getting a functional medicine practitioner, because they not only are well trained and knowledgeable about vitamins, minerals, supplements, but also I think they have the correct approach. They tend to be more holistic, as I am, in their approach to treating patients, and really look towards the individuality of medicine and treatment, because all of us, despite being Homo sapiens, we are all a little bit different, and we all have a little bit different needs, and our bodies all need a little bit different support. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, and I really like the functional medicine approach because they really individualize things. And so if your Western-trained doc is giving you the song and dance that, oh my gosh, you're just going to be wasting your money on supplements, and they don't even want to read the label of your supplements because honestly, they probably don't know much about supplements, I would consider getting a second or a third opinion, or just getting a functional medicine doc or a friend or a family member that's really well-versed in nutrition and supplementation, because you can really learn a lot. A lot of information is out there. It's not hard to find, because it's important to, get stuff from the source and not just based upon one person's advice or whatever. So with that in mind, especially if you're already on medication, you should also talk to your pharmacist if you planned, to add a bunch of supplements to your regime, because certain ones interact, right? They interact with certain medications out there. Like if you're on a blood thinner, for example, there's tons of blood thinners out there nowadays. My dad was just put on one because he had some heart issues, and we talked about his, and I have certain reservations about it because they thin your blood and they can make you bleed to death. If you fall down and bonk your head, like that could be lethal. And so there's a lot of issues with blood thinners. One of them is just that if you have to be on one, right? If you have like a prosthetic, heart valve or something, if you take too much vitamin K, that may counteract your blood thinner and not make it work well. And you could develop a clot on your blood valve. So things like that, a pharmacist is going to be able to spot pretty carefully. And sometimes docs, in all humility, I know that they're not really thinking about this sort of thing. They're not really checking it. Because there are side effects, like another one like ginkgo, if you take that can actually cause more blood thinning, right? St. John's wort, some people take this for things like anxiety and depression. I think that's totally fine, but it can make some other medications that people take, like birth control, for example, less effective. There's other things that can potentially hurt your liver. Some people are into, like kava, like a lot of my Pacific Islanders, those from Tonga, Samoa, they like to drink plenty of kava, and that actually has some side effects. It can hurt your liver, for example. And I know there's supplements out there that have the pipermethysticum, which is kava. And so you just got to be aware that you don't want to be taking too much of this, and you might want to monitor your liver, function tests as well. And so anyway, there's lots of information out there with respect to certain vitamins. You got to be a little bit cautious with how they may interact with medications that you may be taking. And so I would just say, talk with your provider, especially pharmacists, because they really look hard about the interactions. And so I think that's really important to check, especially with the pharmacist, if you're already taking medications and you want to see if what you want to add or what you are already currently taking supplement-wise, if it interacts with any of your prescription medications, because they are really good about looking into that. So, and once again, I stated this a little bit earlier on, I don't want you to substitute supplements for a crappy diet. Like, don't just think you can just get all the supplements in the world and make up for a really crappy diet. You got to start with a clean, healthy, normal, natural, real food diet. Nothing will ever be able to take the place of that. And even so, as I've mentioned, you will often need to add some, vitamin and mineral supplement. So enough about that. Let's talk about, if you want to or already are taking a supplement, let's talk a little bit about what to look for in a supplement, right? So, first of all, the supplement should have a label, right? It should have a nutrition facts kind of label, right? And it should talk about what the dosing is. And these are sort of for the general average person. Your dosing may need to be a little bit higher, or it may need to be a little bit lower. Like if you're already getting a bunch of, calcium, for example, because you take Tums from time to time, which I don't really recommend, but if you happen to take it, there's a bunch of calcium in there too. You just don't want to overdose. So it's always good to pay attention to those labels to see how much of the active ingredient you are getting, right? And then you might want to consider the quality of your supplement. And I would say, number one, please try not to buy a supplement that comes from China, because, their quality control is not awesome. And usually on the label, you can get a good sense of where your supplement was sourced. So look for something that was sourced in a trustworthy place. I look for US, Canada, Europe. I certainly don't take supplements that were sourced in China, because you just can't really be, certain that these are going to be safe, right? So look at the labels carefully. There's also something that's been established. It's called the GMP. That's good manufacturing practices. And the good high quality supplements out there will follow the good manufacturing practices. And they usually put that on the label, which means that they generally use a third party validation technique where they have an independent firm come in and actually test both the quality of their supplement as well as the effectiveness. Because sometimes people, I don't want to mention any names, but there's several that I've seen out there that, say, oh, we have this particular, micronutrient in our supplement, but it's such a small amount that it would never even really help you anyway. But they don't want you to know that small amount necessarily. They just want you to know it has X, Y, or Z micronutrient because, it's maybe popular, right? It may be shown to be clinically helpful, but they may not have actually enough of it to be helpful. The effective dose may be way above what's contained in their capsule. So you got to look at that too. But number one, I would ask you to read the labels to make sure they don't have ingredients sourced in China or places that might be questionable, that they follow the good manufacturing practices or the GMPs, make sure they are following those. Even better, if they are third-party validated by another company that goes in and checks for both quality, lack of, taintments by other things that could be harmful to you. Make sure they don't have any of that in there. Make sure they actually have what they say they have in there. And so there's some third-party organizations like Consumer Lab or NSF International or US Pharmacopoeia. There's all different third-party validation folks out there. And a high-quality supplement will have something on the label that says it's been tested, that it's not going to have contaminants in there and things like that. And also the FDA does check these places out from time to time, but not as much as we would like. Okay. So you really want to be, you want to be smart about your decisions and make sure you're getting a high quality supplement that's well sourced, just like your food, right? You want to make sure it comes from a good source and it's not full of crap, and that the food you're eating isn't in crappy toxic glyphosate, a pesticide-rich soil, or that it's not, fed garbage food. Like when I gave my podcast on meats and grass-fed, grass-finished, there's literally beef out there, and these CAFOs, these confined feeding operations that are literally fed sprinkles, that are basically trash, out-of-date, garbage, sugary sprinkles that they can't get rid of, and they literally feed them to these cows. And so you just gotta, same thing with your supplements, you gotta make sure they're well sourced, to make sure they have followed the good manufacturing practices, right? And that they have some kind of third-party validation. So important, and make sure that you're taking the proper dose as well. And so super important. There's actually some pretty interesting information out there. I have a page which I'll post up in the show notes from the NIH that talks about these things, the effectiveness, the labeling, the safety and risk, the quality. I thought it was a great resource, and I'll put that in the show notes because it's something that most of us don't often think about. We just think, hey, let's just go Google it or check it out on Amazon, and we just buy the cheapest one, and it may not be the best quality. And my wife and I have tried to be a little bit better about that because we do purchase quite a few supplements and from more than one company. And we really make sure that we're getting the high quality stuff, because I wouldn't want myself, my wife, or my kids taking any garbage that's tainted with contaminants or that's sourced in China or that's just going to be, expensive, garbage because it doesn't have the effective dose. I mean, we really want to make sure we're getting the good, high quality stuff. And with that said, it can and will improve your life if you have a deficiency. Taking high quality supplementation, especially the ones that I've spoken about both in this podcast and previous ones, where I've mentioned very common micronutrient deficiencies, mineral, vitamin, other nutrient deficiencies, because there has been lots of data on this. And if you're going to take supplements at all, number one, you want to make sure to take those that are effective, and take those that are good, high quality, well sourced, and that you're not wasting your money on. You want to buy the good stuff, right? Just like you don't want to buy garbage food, you don't want to buy garbage supplements, because take my word for it, there are plenty of them out there. And if you want a little bit more information about what supplements I take personally, or my family, my kids, whatever, that I recommend, you can certainly email me, modernmedicinemovementpodcast@gmail.com. I'd be happy to share with you what I take. And like I said, I take them from various different companies, because not every company has every single supplement available, and I want to make sure they're good, they're well sourced, and that they work and that they're effective. And so feel free to reach out. But I would just say in closing that, holy crap, how would you know how much better you could feel if you were completely replete or enriched or full of all the healthful vitamins and minerals that you needed? If you had zero vitamin or mineral or micronutrient deficiencies, can you imagine how much better you might feel? It's amazing. I mean, quick 30-second story of myself. I started really, digging deep in supplementation, 5, 6, 7 years ago when I started to take supplements myself. I was into my 40s already, and I was like, crap, I don't feel like I once did, man. I mean, I'm healthy. I don't have any medical problems. I don't take any pills, no pharmaceuticals, nothing like that. But I just don't feel awesome anymore. I don't have that zest. I don't have that energy. Part of it was, other factors like sleep and, proper diet. I had a good diet, but, there were things that I could have improved upon. Like I used to have some vegetable oils like canola oil or, soybean oil. I just didn't used to look as carefully at that kind of stuff. So I had some issues with my diet, but also I took zero supplements. I was sort of like anti-supplement, because I was like, why should I? Why should I waste my money on that if I can just spend my money on good, high-quality food? I didn't realize how depleted our soils were. Holy crap, they've been depleted for almost 100 years in this country, in the US of A anyway. I know some of you guys are out in other places, Europe, Australia, New Zealand. Shout out to me. I'd love to know what your soils are like over there. But here, unfortunately, back home for me in the US of A, our soils have been depleted and deficient in so many important micronutrients for nearly 100 years because of the poor agricultural practices that we've done in this country. And I didn't really know about that. I just thought, hey, I'm going to I'm going to just eat good, healthy foods, and I'm going to be fine. And guess what? At 40 years old, I thought I was fine. I was not fine. If you knew me then and know me now, you'd be like, holy crap, man, this is a different guy. He's, coming up on 50, but he has more energy. He's energetic. He's not grumpy. He sleeps well. He's in a good mood most of the time. He's full of life, vitality. He can keep up with the teenagers. Like at 40 or even in my 30s, I couldn't do that because I didn't know all this stuff. I didn't supplement at all. I didn't pay as important of attention to my diet, what I put in, because truly garbage in equals garbage out. So at the end of the day, I have not only in myself, my wife, my kids, my personal experiences, but also many shared experiences with my family and friends and thousands of other people seen tremendous benefits from not only good high quality food in their life, but good high quality supplementation to make up for our soils that kind of suck in most places, that lack a lot of the nutrients that we need. And I've seen such tremendous benefits with the addition of supplementation to a good high quality diet that, I have thousands of examples of all different things from methylated folate helping people to vitamin D helping people to, even probiotics and things like that aren't technically on the list for most people, at least most Western trained physicians, right? There was a really cool article I found too, and I don't really have time to discuss it. We're getting close to our time, but it's basically what supplements do the doctors or scientists take? Because, there's so many out there. Like, what do the really smart guys take? And it's everything from turmeric to vitamin D to probiotics to prebiotics, the omega-3s, stuff like that was described in this article. And I found it not only helpful, but fascinating because at the end of the day, we got to make a choice. We want to not spend thousands of dollars on supplements necessarily, but we want to pick and choose the best stuff, the most high quality stuff, the biggest bang for our proverbial buck. And that I think you can do now that we have so much information out there. Like I said, you can reach out to me, ask what I take and things like that. But at the end of the day, I just want you to know that I have noticed personally, oh my gosh, a tremendous difference in my life pre and post supplementation. And so many others out there have as well. If you were able to talk to Dr. Mark Hyman or Dr. Mercola, or, these kinds of people that are super brilliant, they're super up on health and wellness, nutrition, diet, supplementation, they will all tell you that there are reasons to take certain supplements and that they personally do take them as well, because there is benefit. And once again, they don't take the place of a crappy diet. So start real, start natural, start whole, and then fill in the gaps. And it can be done, guys. It is not difficult. So sorry for a little bit of a rant there at the end, but I just want you guys to know that I have found tremendous benefits from supplements in my life, my family, my kids, thousands of others, and I would just like you to experience the same thing. Why not feel like you were 20 again? Or heck, a teenager again with the energy. I know we don't want to go through all the other crap that teenagers go through, but hey, to have that energy, to have that spunk, to have that vitality, why the heck not? I know I'm after it, and I'm getting after it, and I do it, both with great, clean, diet as well as some additional supplementation because they go hand in hand. They really do, work together, and they work together for our benefit, for our health, for our wellness, for our wholeness, our vitality, and it's possible. So thanks again, guys. I love you. Share this if you found any value. Subscribe. Let me know if you have questions. I love it when you guys reach out. I appreciate any further podcast ideas. Reach out to me, Modern Medicine Movement Podcast at gmail.com, at Aloha Surf Doc, Thomas Hemingway on Facebook and Instagram, and the Modern Medicine Movement Podcast. So that's it for now. Hope you're having a great spring break maybe, that you and yours are healthy and well. All my best. A big aloha.